Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Tech Off podcast, where we interview HR leaders on everything related to workforce intelligence, the use of real-time data and insights on jobs, skills, tasks to help organizations understand, predict and transform their workforce. And today I'm lucky enough to be interviewing one of our Tech Off customers, Rob Etheridge, Group Head of Workforce Strategy and Insights at HSBC. Rob there leads, among others, the skills-led workforce management initiative of the bank and the general ambition to be more skills-informed. Welcome, Rob. It's great to have you.
It's nice to be here, Julius, and a favourite topic of mine. So looking forward to getting into it.
Well, that's perfect. Let's dive in straight then, because as we do on this podcast, I will first ask you a question of our previous guest, who was Guillaume Lavoie from Sanofi. Yeah. He leads their skills initiative there. And actually, this wasn't scripted or anything, but the question is perfect for you and the position that you're in at HSBC, because Guillaume was wondering whether my next guest has a use case for more intelligent workforce planning that's skills-based. So feel free to react to his curiosity there.
Yeah, I think that is one of the core questions that we need to be asking ourselves. Embedding skills into the way that we plan the future of the organization, I think, is at the heart of skills-led talent management, skills-led business management, frankly. So a really, really important question. So I salute that question. I think it's also at the heart of what we're doing at HSBC. There are, you will know, Julius, so many different use cases for skills. Some of them come and go depending on what's happening in the business at a particular time. Some are more enduring. I think this workforce planning piece really gets to the heart of why we want to be skills-led. We can think about skills in two ways as it relates to the workforce. Firstly, workforce is the biggest cost to the organization. So are we getting bang for our buck in terms of that cost? For most organizations, it could be 60, 70% of the overhead is just running the workforce. But making sure that you've got the right skills embedded in that is absolutely key. I think there's a second point that's perhaps even more important in that, which is how are you going to succeed in the future? You've got the right skills to do the things that your future organization needs to do to keep winning in the markets that it's in. It comes down to three words, really, which is future, competitive, advantage. I think that's where the heart of this lies, because it's so important to businesses to know that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, there's still a relevance to the workforce, that they will still be delivering things that the business needs to succeed. Therefore, planning for that now and understanding what those future requirements are going to be is absolutely key. To my mind, then all other use cases stem from that. If we can ensure that our planning incorporates that skills view and means that we can plan for it accordingly, then the other use cases seem to then align with that. They may come and go, but that's okay because you have a core capability in terms of understanding the skills that you need for the future. So yes, that is something that's clearly in focus for us at HSBC.
And on that note, it's a perfect segue to HSBC. If we zoom in to why you embarked on this skills-led transformation in general, I'm keen to understand the business triggers for that. Can you talk a little bit about organizational context strategy and how that trickled down to the ambitions you've set out today?
Yes. And I would say, when we started out thinking about skills, there were very specific instances or use cases within the organization that we were thinking about. So, for example, in our wealth management business, we know we need more wealth managers in the future, particularly in key markets in Asia. That's no secret. And I think, therefore, as an organization, what we've been looking at is, well, what skill sets do we have internally that we can channel towards that specific requirement in the future? So if I go back 2-3 years, that was an existing use case. If we're going to solve for that problem, then we have to know what skills we have internally, what adjacency there is between wealth management advisors and other types of role that we have in the bank. Because we know in some markets, we're simply not going to find enough people to fill our ambition in that particular area. So when I think back, this really stemmed from some of those key use cases that were around at the time, specific questions that we had around how do we develop our workforce for particular reasons. But that's evolved. And I think what's emerged is, well, reasons may come and go. depending on the markets we're operating in, depending on what skills availability there is within the organization and externally. Actually, what's our capability more generally around recognizing those shifts and being able to cater to them? And I think that's where planning, workforce planning itself, and being able to look at capability planning going into the future, as well as our costs and as well as our capacity. It's the triaging of those three areas within planning that we need to get really good at. Do we have enough people? And are they doing the right things in the right places to make us successful in the future? The other elements of workforce planning have been easier, let's say, or perhaps there's just a legacy of those things being part of planning. The capability piece, I think, is one that in the industry we've all struggled with for a while. Now, with the advent of large language models, with AI that can actually help us get 80% of the way, it's opened up a new opportunity for us. So now it's that extra dimension to workforce planning that we're looking at. So we've gone from thinking about specific use cases to now in the last year or two, really then focusing on, well, what's our overall capability from a planning point of view? So when these problem statements come along, we have the capability to spot them and then cater it in terms of our fulfillment strategies.
Yeah. And it's one thing to be able to spot and link to business strategy. There's another thing on the how to get started. And there's so many things to consider.
Yeah.
Lots of companies that are getting started right now, you've started already, are wondering from your point of view, what can you recommend? What are hurdles you see? Where do you see companies get started in the wrong way? So let me just ask you the open question. How did you get started?
I think there's a few key elements that need to come together to get us on our way. You can think about this from the strategic all the way through to the logistical or the operational. It's worth getting a few of those foundational blocks in place so that you can take the next step into linking them together in order to come up with a coherent skills-led workforce strategy. So one of the things that we've been focusing on for a couple of years now is, do we have a coherent, agreed, consistent way of describing the future workforce? That would include, what capabilities do we need in the future? We worked with the businesses around the organization to articulate what that looks like. We called them blueprints. We have a number of these relatively high level and simple blueprints that just outline what it would take to have a workforce that delivers our business strategy. So if our business strategy is to expand into certain markets, or transform the way that we do things for our customers, or launch new products, or embark on an M&A journey, those things are key to then understanding what kind of workforce do we need to actually then deliver against those things. Is that different from the workforce today? And by actually recording that in a strategic document, a blueprint, if you like, of the future, it gives us a starting point. It gives us something, a North Star, if you like, to aim towards, that is agreed across the business and HR, so that we know what we're headed for. I would say that's been key. It's not all the way to where it needs to be right now. We're doing more with that. We want to codify it within our systems, which is something we're working on right now at that kind of aggregate level, so that we know when we measure what kind of skills we have, or how many people we have in a market, or what the demographic structure of the organization looks like, we can say, okay, well, let's hold that up now to that ambition and see, are we on the way there? Are there gaps? Or actually, do we now want to revisit that blueprint, which we do annually, to say, actually, this needs to tweak. There are new market pressures. There are different types of skills coming up. We've seen an opportunity that we hadn't before. Let's enshrine that within that blueprint, change it. And now we've, again, got something to measure up to. So I would say on the very strategic side, it's worth having something along those lines in place. Understand where your organization wants to be in terms of success criteria, and then understand what that means for your workforce. And that helps everybody to be oriented in the same direction. Then we can go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and think, well, operationally, how do we make that happen? And that's where we've been working with you guys very closely, which is to say, in order to measure our success against these criteria, do we have the right people with the right skills? How do we get there? We understand what skills we have in the first place, so that we now have an opportunity to look at the gap between where we need to go, and be able to measure that along the way. In the middle there is workforce planning, which starts to connect these two sides of things, the very strategic to the very operational. And that's where we're looking to plug everything together.
Yeah. How often is that blueprint changing?
Is annually at the moment. I would say we're still finding our way with it. I think it often comes up in our executive forums. Maybe we need to adjust it. We need to have a look at it. So one of the things we found is if that's in a document that gets put in a drawer, not so helpful. What we're doing is changing that to become enshrined within our management reporting to systematize the way that we track against all of this stuff. So what are the key metrics? Once we've identified this in a blueprint, what are the key metrics that we can take out of that that would be key to the success? How do we know that we're tracking in the right way? Whilst we revisit it annually, we're now starting to set up a monthly cadence where if we know what that success criteria look like, we can actually track towards that. That keeps the conversation relevant. It keeps it of the moment without changing the aim all the time. I think along the way, you need to test, prod and poke what that ambition is. Then if there's a real need to adjust accordingly, you don't want to wait another year. You may take a decision as a business, in partnership with HR to say, actually, we want to tweak this. We're now looking at something slightly different, but it's going to be different for every organization. So annually at the moment, but looking to do that much more regularly in terms of tracking and monitoring.
Fantastic. And moving from that blueprint piece to the more operational piece, you mentioned the data points that we've partnered on to create. Can you talk a little bit about, just in general, the partnership HSBC TechWolf? How did our paths cross and why did you decide to partner? I think it's an important consideration because many people in roles like yours are scouring the market looking for external support. So your considerations there and the decision to go for the data player that we are could be very valuable to share here.
Of course. I think there's a few elements to that, Julius. And I think I'm going to say it's 3-4 years ago now that the HSBC and TechWolf first crossed paths. I think it was to do with those original use cases where we're saying, well, actually, we do need a way of identifying skills we have in the organization without having to start from scratch each time. Not to say that these exercises have never been done before. Of course they have. And as an industry, we've been thinking about skills-led talent management, workforce management and strategy for decades, since the 90s. So it isn't a new thing, but I think what was different here was us saying, how do we make this a sustainable practice? Is there anyone out there that can actually help us with the advent of large language models to actually get on top of this regular basis so that actually the hard work getting all the way to the point of identifying skills manually is taken out and we can focus on the really important bit, which is insight and then the actions that spring from the insight. What we were able to do in partnership with yourselves then over the following months and years was to check the veracity of the data that came back from inferencing. We wanted to prove to ourselves the idea is great. You can use AI to actually infer skills to at least get you 80% of the way before you've even started applying some human intelligence to all of this. Sounds good, but the veracity of the data has to be of a certain level. Otherwise, you've got just as much work to do as you would have done without the assistance of an LLM. So we spent some time with yourselves thinking about, well, how do we test the outcomes then? So we worked with businesses with some of their employee data, using different sources of employee data, then say, okay, well, if we apply this, what results do we get back? And through that iterative process with yourselves of tuning the models, looking at the data outcomes, we got to a point where we were really comfortable that what was coming back from the inferencing processes was really good data. Yes, it still may need some human intervention ultimately in terms of saying, well, this is a skill we care about. This is a skill we don't care so much about. How do we govern all of this? But as a starting point, what we proved to ourselves in that first year or two is that, yes, what was an abstract idea actually can be practical in its application because we understand that the data itself is of good quality and properly represents what our employees are able to do. The other aspect that comes to mind is that what we need here is data. We don't need another employee portal. We've got plenty of those. We have a lot of instances around our tech ecosystem that think about skills from a different perspective already. We've got learning systems, we've got TA systems, we've got our core architecture, all of which have the capability to hold some type of data around skill. Problem is that vendors at the moment all use different taxonomies. They govern things in different ways. They aren't necessarily able to then give us the license to share that data across our ecosystem. So what we needed was a source of data that becomes the truth across all of these different areas within our tech stack. I think working with yourselves, you understood that the value here is in the data, not necessarily an outward facing technology. That actually, for most organizations, we've already invested in an ecosystem from a tech perspective that does what it needs to do. Is it being supplied with the right data? Are we joining it together in a way that makes sense to employees and helps us, experts and executives, therefore, get the right insights to make the right decisions? And that second piece, often a no. I think a lot of us have got all these different toys, but we're not putting them together in a way that actually makes sense for the organization and help us with that strategic mindset to make those skills-led decisions. So I think working with you as a data provider, really this is new data as well. It's new data into our ecosystem, and then thinking, well, how do we distribute that data? How do we use it to gain those insights that we need? Now, how do we attach it to our planning, use it as a core component of our future workforce? It's those things where the value really comes from. So yeah, I would say those are the three areas where it's been great to work with yourselves, and one of the key reasons we've worked with you is not only the veracity of the data, but also the understanding of how that data can be used post generation.
Awesome. And can you share a little bit the overall current state of the collaboration, and then a couple of wins you've seen already? Because I know the sharing of wins is important in any change management initiative. You are tracking that blueprint regularly, and you're down deep in the foundation operationally, but we need to get out of the shadows often enough in HR to show what's happening, to surface some progress. Can you share a bit where you're at with that and what you've been able to surface already?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, it's been great to work between two companies jointly to iterate as we've gone. I think that's important. We've recognized what hasn't worked so well, what has worked, and now there is a trodden path there that we can look back on and go, okay, here's what we've learned along the way. And it's been good that there's been that approach from both sides, somewhat agile in terms of saying, well, let's try something, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. We've still got an ultimate objective in mind. So I've really enjoyed that way of working, and I think it's got us to where we are today. I would say two things stand out along the way in terms of key milestones, if you like, that now enable the rest of the roadmap to come together. One was the creation of a taxonomy that was attached to our internal job structures. Now that sounds incredibly boring, but it's so fundamental now to how we're going to go and do things going forwards. And it led to our second success, which I'll get to in a second. But without that key foundation, without a solid base to start to think about skills and the application of those skills through the organization, but not just that, how do we talk about skills? How do we know that we're saying the same thing? We're discussing specific key or strategic or critical skills within the organization. How do we bubble this up into a meaningful set of conversations? Because frankly, we identified 4,000 or 5,000 different skills within the organization. It's impossible to talk about that many skills. So having a taxonomy that not only gives a secure footing to now what we want to go on and do in terms of applying it to planning or thinking about fulfillment strategies with TA or development, working with the business to identify where those critical skills are, but being able to bubble up our language in a way that makes sense. So sure, 4,000 skills, but actually 300 different packages of skills. And on top of that, a lesser amount of then families that we can talk about in terms of skills. So having that taxonomy, being able to use AI to create that taxonomy, but then also manage and govern taxonomy, incredibly helpful. And as I say, now sort of provides the the basis on which we can sustainably go on and do other things without having to start all over again, with a common language around skills that we can use with the rest of HR and the business. So success number one, I would say, was that, and a key turning point, a milestone. What that's enabled us to do is now work with a large business within HSBC to start to link all of this together. So at the end of 2024, we successfully ran a pilot, and I spoke earlier about strategic all the way through to the sort of logistical, operational side of things, the technical side of things. Do we know where we're heading for in terms of strategy? What's our North Star? What's critical to the organization? What's going to be the marker of success from a business perspective? The way through to, well, how do we identify skills, manage them, and attach them to employees? Do we have the data to then help us understand whether we're doing what we need to from a strategic perspective? We strung those things together using workforce planning with a business to say, well, can we actually now make all of this work? If we've got something coherent over here, and now we have the data for that business over here in terms of its employees, how do we bring this together in a way that makes sense and drives action? So we successfully did that at the end of 2024. We ran a pilot where all of this is now lined up. We took a business's workforce plans, which are based on this overarching strategy. We recodified those plans in skills language. We understand which of those skills are important. We helped the business then, within their existing plan, work out, well, what's the new skills profile for the organization in the future? The way we did that was we used our job family and job architecture setup, which is linked to skills. We now have a view of what the future skills profile looks like if we do nothing. That's really important, because as we look at the future 2-3 years, and we say, well, if we do nothing right now and continue as is with the current skill sets that we've got and the way that those are planning to be grown within specific areas, actually we can see a gap to our future ambition. What needs to change within our plans? Now, the cost and the capacity may be fixed. Do we need another type of capability or a shift in our capability within those confines that helps us get that strategic outcome? On the other hand, what about our supply? We have the employees, once we've done that work, to actually fulfill a strategic capability. We're able to now identify those gaps and say, well, no, we don't in some instances. We care about those instances. Are these key and critical skills that we need for the future? And if yes, what are we going to do about it? So now the conversation's moved on. Conversation has moved on to, do we need to hire more people with these critical skills? Can we, within the markets that we operate? How does that affect our location strategy? What about the employees that already exist? Are there areas actually where we see the skills demand diminishing in the future? What do we do with those employees? Is there enough adjacency between what they do and the skills that we actually need? And we have identified areas where that's the case. So now we can talk to our employees and say, actually, the next 2 to 3 years, we really want you to start learning or adding these skills to your profile, because in the future, this is what your job may look like. So that is the huge success, I would say, and has really convinced and is convincing execs and the organization at large that it's worth investing in this ecosystem. Because again, what I'll go back to is, are we deriving future competitive advantage by what we're doing here? Because if we're not, really, what's it for? That, to me, is the key in all of this. We've piloted that now with part of our organization. Now, really what we're looking to do is industrialize and move to the next of saying, okay, well, now across our businesses, this is now a way that we can start to identify where we need to move to and how we fulfill the needs as HR, helping the business through hiring, through development, mobility of our workers within the organization.
Yeah. To connect back to the question on how to get started for our listeners, for you to advise them, how did you pick that area of the business? And can you even share what area that was?
So it's a technical area within our business. We started with our technology function. A couple of reasons. One is there are very specific skills within technology that can be identified Also, it's an area that's undergoing, as everyone will know, huge amount of transformation, change within the industry. Simply the way people code now is different from the way it was not too long ago. Do we need the same types of technical people is an enduring question. So in order to test the veracity, if we go back again a couple of years in our journey, we were working very closely with technology to say, well, you have different sources of data around your employees. It's not just from HR systems, which we did use. It's also, we can look at things like Jira. What projects are people on? What about Bitbucket or GitHub? The types of coding people are doing, the languages they're using. We wanted to test a variety of sources to really ensure that the quality of the data that we're producing was really good. So there's an existing relationship and understanding within the technology function around what we were doing and why, and they could clearly see the use of that. For this most current pilot, we took a subsection of that. So an organization of about 3,000 people, predominantly focused on data engineering and data architecture and analytics. And with that area of 2,000 to 3,000, there was a distinct workforce plan, as there is for all parts of our business, a strategy. Now, that strategy has really come under scrutiny and under a spotlight within the organization for all the reasons I've mentioned. The industry is rapidly changing. But not just that, area of the business have also been asked by our execs to think about, well, what does our data and analytics capability need to be group wide? Not just within your area, but group wide. What are the standards that we need to measure ourselves by as an organization, not just within your function? So that's a bit of a head scratcher for any function. Well, how do you find that out? So what we had were a set of partners in our data and analytics organization who were keen to work with us, firstly to test it for themselves, but if the burden of proof was indeed satisfied that we could do something with skills-led inferencing, actually there's a bigger use case here that they're very interested in as well, which is, okay, and now look across the organization, what skills are prevalent around data and analytics, not just within this function, and how do we measure that up to the broader requirement as an organization that's being demanded by regulators and therefore by execs? So I think finding a partner that's firstly got the wherewithal to have a strategic viewpoint around where they need to go, but also the strategic imperative to be involved with us, to work along with us, to actually prove the concept was key. So they kind of chose themselves. They self-selected, if you like, in terms of an area to start. Yeah. And we can see that that's meant that we've had real success.
Yeah, awesome. But HSBC is a huge organization, and you've done a lot of talking about skills internally. Can you give our audience a sense of the level of networking and pitching that needs to be done in order to move the needle, and a little bit about best practices in that regard?
Of course, can. I think it's worth recognizing that in the first instance, we're talking about an abstract concept. So it's fair to say that not everyone is going to immediately hook on to the value that's involved in the body of work that we've been talking about. So because it's abstract, as you say, storytelling is absolutely key. The first thing is to think about, well, what is it that your organization is trying to solve? For us in HSBC, yes, there were these use cases. But I think if we'd have stayed there, we wouldn't have got to the place where we are now. Actually, the overriding momentum in HSBC has been around planning for the future. Are we going to win in the markets that we have selected? How do we manage the cost base of the workforce? And how do we know that we've got the right people and that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck? So knowing that those were the strategic imperatives for the organization, it was clear that we needed to move to a point where we were telling a story that really solved for those points. Along with that, then, we needed evidence along the way that actually the path we were treading was indeed something that was going to take us there. Hence, setting something up from a POC perspective that very much catered to that set of problem statements. But it's hard graft. I mean, I would say we've been working with you guys for 3 years or so. I'd say at least 2 of that has been spent gaining traction within the organization, riding out periods of time where perhaps the focus was on other things, but keeping some momentum in the background around the work that we were doing, the foundational side of things. But at the right moment, really coming through with either some insights or a proposition for executives within the business that would solve for problems that they were experiencing, but being selective and making sure that the problems we're solving for are actually leading to this broader strategic imperative that we'd identified around future planning, understanding the gap, and making sure that we're successful as an organization. So it's a combination of those things, but to your question, storytelling is absolutely key. When you've got something abstract, you have to bring it to life. You have to help people to understand what the value is. And then you can start to do things that actually prove that value out and help to gain momentum along the way.
Fantastic. My one but last question is around what's next.
Yeah.
And I'll frame it in, imagine we're sitting here exactly 1 year from now. What do you hope you'd be talking about in a second podcast conversation about the skills journey, the workforce intelligence journey of HSBC?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me fast forward a year. I think really it's about less on the how and really on the how we're using the outcomes to drive executive decision making, strategic decision making within the organization. That's the point of all of this, is can we direct our workforce in a way internally that provides us with that future competitive advantage? And how is it that we're measuring that advantage? What are the distinct business measures that are outlined in those blueprints I talked about earlier, where we're saying, well, if our business objective is this, then our workforce needs to look like this. Really, that's the focus. So I would hope in a year's time, we're talking about, well, here's how we are changing our workforce as a result of the insights that we've got from using our skills data. I would say that's the first point. The second point then is, what does the practice in HR itself look like as a result of now having skills-led talent management practices, workforce management practices, even skills-led performance and reward practices? Because what we should feel is that actually now having this data and being able to apply it in decision making is that it should really start to impact the products as well as the advice and consultancy that HR is providing to the rest of the organization. We should see that our own processes internally now incorporate the value of this data and are shaping the output from HR to the rest of the organization to therefore shape business decisions. So those are the two success criteria in my mind at a macro level that hopefully in a year's time we're either there or we're seeing that formulate and start to feel like that's a reality, which I think we're well on course to do.
Well, we'll see all about that prediction in 1 year's time. We'll do this again, and we can check how that has been progressing. Before we close off, the final question is actually your question, namely the question you want to ask to our next guest. And our next guest will also be a TechWolf customer. So feel free to ask anything related to skills, related to workforce intelligence, anything you're curious about. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I've talked a lot about the strategy, the workforce strategy at large, but perhaps my question can be then about the employee experience or the worker experience of being skills-led as an organization. So I guess my question would be, how are your other customers thinking about the value to the employee of being skills-led? And how are they constructing that interaction with the employee so it becomes real to them and they can make their own decisions based on the skills that they've got?
Fantastic. Let's see how they roll with that. I'll get the answer to you when they do. And nothing left for me to say, but thank you so much, Rob, in your busy schedule to make some gaps for this one. And I hope we do this again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Julius.